Hello, friends. Gregg Braden here. I think you probably know by now that our dear friend John Peterson is no longer in this world with us. John passed peacefully, surrounded by family after a brief battle with illness. He spoke about it publicly, so I'm comfortable sharing with you with pancreatic cancer. I'm still a little bit in shock and a little bit in awe of how quickly he passed. I had a meal with him only weeks earlier. I had been in Berkeley Springs for the transition talks. I knew he wasn't feeling well. I sure didn't think he was going to leave the world as quickly as he did. And I want to talk to you about that a little bit. You know, John and I had a very unique relationship. I think a lot of it stems from we had a very similar worldview because we had a similar history in terms of our relationship to the world during the Cold War years. John, of course, was military. He was in the Navy, um, high-ranking naval official, and I was civilian DoD, Department of Defense, working closely with the Air Force as a senior computer systems designer, designing, installing, and training cadets on software during the Cold War. And we both recognized how different the world would be if that Cold War had gone just a little differently. And we both recognized how close we came as a planet to losing the things that we love and cherish as a human species. And we both recognized that we are at a critical point in the history of our world now where the systems that emerged from the Cold War, those unsustainable systems of economy and finance and agriculture and healing and energy and economies, and it goes on, those unsustainable systems are buckling and collapsing because a new world is emerging. And that was what fired John up. And that was the foundation for much of our friendship because John wasn't about fixing the world that exists. He was very content to let that world go. He would often say to me, how often do we have the opportunity to build a new world? And he was right. He had the rare gift of doing something, and very few people can do this really well. When we talked about that new world, he wouldn't take the existing structures and then modify them to make them better in the new world. What he would do is let those structures go, start with what that new world could look like and the beautiful opportunities that could be presented in that new world. And then he'd reverse engineer, he'd work backward and say, what do we have to do to get to that? And it led to some very interesting conversations about what's necessary and what's not. Do we need a government? Do we need an economy? Do we need money? Do we need big cities? I mean, these are all valid conversations. Very, very few people are willing to have. Uh, Many people are afraid of the consequences of having those conversations with their peers and their platforms and things like that. So John and I would have those conversations. He would drive 2 hours from his home in Berkeley Springs, pick me up at one of the DC airports, and we had 2 hours to drive back. And we did this for years. And one day John said, it's too bad we're not recording these. The cameras didn't work well in the vehicle at night on the drives back. So we designed every 2 weeks, a program called What's Up, where we would have those conversations, record them, and share them with you. And I'm smiling because it's the way they would always begin. I'd get in the car in DC and John would say, hey, Greg,
What's up?
what are you thinking about? What's been on your mind? And that was the way we began the What's Up programs that have come to you every 2 weeks with rare exceptions due to travel or illness. Pretty much every 2 weeks. And I've lost track. I didn't even know how many episodes we've recorded. I'm meeting with the board of directors for the Arlington Institute, John's think tank. That is the kind of the central hub for all of these, the transition talks that happen once a month in Berkeley Springs and the quartet programs and the What's Up and all the things happening behind the scenes. I'm meeting with them in a few days to determine what programs will go forward and what form they may take. And I don't know what the answer to that's going to be, but what I do know with absolute certainty is there will never be another What's Up. That series is ending because that was between John and I, and we couldn't duplicate that. I think it'd be dishonoring to do that. So what we have done is my team has put together a highlights reel from our What's Up from over the years, and you'll see we look different over the years, probably more me than John. My hair changes color and it gets longer and shorter, and these are the conversations, not in their entirety, but some of the highlights, because we wanted to honor that program, the energy that John and I put into it, his legacy that we will do our best to continue in some form. And I wanted you to know just a little bit about where that program came from, how it originated, why it will not continue, and what you see next. Stay tuned, and this video and what you're going to see now are highlights from the conversations that John and I have had. I believe we started around 2010 with What's Up. And I hope you enjoy them as much as John and I have enjoyed putting these together. And I hope as you watch them that you open your heart and you recognize that we lost a beautiful soul, a rare intellect, a dear friend, a visionary, certainly a futurist, one of the first, I believe, of his kind. And I hope that you can appreciate what it is that John's saying and sense the dream that he had for the world that he knew was possible, I believe is still possible. And from that perspective, I hope you really enjoy these reels. Thank you once again for your love and support. Thank you, John Peterson, for the light, the love, the vision that you brought to this world so very well. And we'll do our very best to honor your legacy. I love you all. Thank you.
I'm a futurist. I have been for 30 years. I'm a professional futurist. There are not too many of us around that study the future in a systematic and almost full-time way. Written books about the kind of techniques and approaches to thinking about the future. What's coming is on our horizon is nothing less than extraordinary. And it's really quite fundamental to who we are as human beings. And it's unlike anything any of us have ever experienced before. In fact, you could argue that it's unlike anything that's ever happened in recorded history. And so it's a really, really, really big deal. We have a limited amount of time to start to build the framework, the basic architecture for a new way of living. Otherwise, we get locked, for lots of reasons that are easily explainable, you get locked into this dystopian track that's going in quite a different kind of way. I believe in people. I believe in our ability to adapt, to care, to imagine, and to build. The world is changing fast. AI, technology, even our understanding of consciousness. But these are tools. It's up to us to use them wisely to create a world that is more loving, more just, more beautiful. So what's happening in humans, and how do you get from here to there?
Well, this is where it gets really exciting, even more exciting for me. And the really good news is that there is something within us that gives us the ability to adapt and as I mentioned, to thrive. Not just survive, but thrive. We are literally wired for change, and we're wired to thrive in the kinds of changes we're seeing, but we're not told that. And if you don't know that, we are what are called self-referencing beings, John. And for viewers that may not be really clear on what that is, consciously and subconsciously, we tend to hinge our sense of well-being on the world around us. We're now learning that we are born with and arrived on this planet with, and I want to talk about what that means. We arrived on this planet with the ability to self-regulate already intact. It did not evolve slowly, gradually over long periods of time. What the new discoveries are showing is that anatomically modern humans, that's us, we showed up 200,000 years ago, and scientists agree upon the date. They say, yes, modern humans appeared 200,000 years ago. We don't know where we came from. And the mystery now is why we showed up fully intact. We haven't changed in 200,000 years. Anatomically, modern humans are today as they were 200,000 years ago. So our ability to adapt to this change is not something that evolves slowly, gradually over a long period of time. It appears to be
built in.
It is. We give it to us at the factory, wherever the factory is.
Emergence of a new human. And that's not, those words, it's easy for those words to just go by your head and not think about it. I mean, this is new. This is different.
Sure.
This is fundamentally a new way of seeing yourself and seeing the world. And it manifests itself, as you suggested, in your physiology. There's mainstream geneticists who are now saying that your grandchildren are going to be a whole new species, and they're going to have 3 and 4 strands of DNA, and it's already showing up different places in the world. That is just a fundamentally new kind of species.
Well, it is. And
you have all these natural things that you brought with you. I don't mean natural in the terms we're talking about, but these historic and things that your parents have told you and society has told you, and they're all at risk at this point. Yep. And that's the essence of how you transit and get into this new space, because what you have to do is be open enough to question the kinds of things that you brought into the room with you, because it's a new space that you're going
all about, it's our story.
Yeah.
There's an American author, I love his work, his name is Scott Turow.
Yep.
And Scott Turow says very eloquently, he says, who are we? But the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and believe. It's not just what we tell ourselves, but it's what we believe to be true. And then you ask, well, where do our stories come from? Where's my story come from?
Where do your belief come from?
My story comes from my family, it comes from my neighbors, from my culture, from the education, what school I went to, my religious upbringing. And some of the story is conscious and a lot of it is subconscious. And this is where we really get into the issues, because our subconscious beliefs have us so deeply rooted in false assumptions of an obsolete science. And the new discoveries have overturned all that. So we ask science to tell us who we are. Science is doing it, and a lot of scientists don't like the answers.
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm always amazed, but I'm not surprised. I'm in awe at how quickly the change in this world is happening. I've spent a tremendous amount of time with indigenous peoples throughout the world, from the highlands of central China and the monasteries in Tibet and the mountains of Egypt and Nepal and India and Bolivia and Peru and all through the American desert Southwest and the Yucatan and much more. And every one of those elders that I have been with, they've told us for generations that this change was coming. They all knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And I've also had the opportunity to be with just amazing scientists, engineers, spiritual leaders, political leaders, presidents. Everyone has known that the change was coming, and everyone that I've spoken with in the last couple of years is absolutely blown away at how fast it's happening. They knew it was coming, but they thought it was going to happen like slowly, gradually, over generations. They didn't think there would be a single pivotal generation that has to go through the kind of change.
It's exponential. I mean, I started talking about this stuff like you did 20 years ago, almost, giving speeches around the Pentagon about all the converging trends. And then you're in the middle of it and you go, God, you know, it's everywhere. Martin Armstrong has got computer models that he developed at the CIA, and other people tried to get from him, and they threw him in jail because he wouldn't give them their stuff. But Martin Armstrong is highly accurate in terms of the projections out of his suit. And his whole capability is all based upon cycles. And what he sees is this confluence of all of these cycles coming together that is driving the major change. And just one other point is that what he also sees is that food prices go up significantly. He's driven in part by the temperature going down, moving ourselves into an area of kind of a mini ice age.
Well, as a geologist back in the 70s and 80s, I was looking at this, and it was before climate change was in vogue, although climate change has always been happening. We were looking at the ice cores out of Antarctica from an area called Vostok Lake.
Yeah, sure.
Which was done in 1980s. And those cycles, the ice Scientists, they recognized the climate was changing. They didn't know where it was going to go. They didn't know the cause, but they said, let's capture as much data as we can before the ice is destroyed, and then we'll have it, and we can go back and figure it out. So even they were amazed, John. They pulled up 420,000 layers of ice from Antarctica. Each layer represents 1 year of Earth's history. So they could compare that to today, and I'll tell you, it's like clockwork. The rise and the fall of global temperatures, and we're right on track for a warming. The question is how much warming and how long does it last? And what the cycles have always shown is the warming, first of all, it's intense, but it is brief.
Right.
And it peaks, and it's what is after the warming that has always been the problem.
You suggest there's a philosophical shift that has to happen, almost an existential kind of philosophic framework that starts to say, who am I? How's this world work? Everything else in a whole kind of different way. And as you know, I've spent some time trying to think about this emergent kind of new world, and you have to start with what are the underlying principles, the underpinnings of that frame your perspective of how the world works, and who am I, and how does this larger work, and what's
Sure.
Here at Postscript, we feature in-depth conversations with a variety of individuals from around the world, all who are contributing in one significant way or another to this giant epical transition that's happening on the planet, heading from an older era into a new one that has significantly different characteristics than anything that we've had before. And our guest today, which we're pleased to have, is Gregg Braden. Tell us a little bit about what you've been thinking about lately.
30 years ago, I was spending time with indigenous elders in many places in the world, and they told us that a time of transition was coming. They told us the world was going to change. I was an
futurists.
They were futurists. They were the original futurists. I have been, as well as you, we have been thinking about these changes, what they could mean, if they were to happen back in the 80s, what they do mean to us now. And what I know is that the best minds of our time are telling us it is a fact that we're living what's being called a time of extremes. And I think that's a good term, John, because it doesn't mean only bad things are happening or even good things, but it means big changes are happening in the world. And I think for many people, the changes are happening faster than we've been prepared to accept. We don't have a good guidebook.
So we're working our way into a period of, by definition, great uncertainty. Lots of change, not a lot of kind of logic to it, larger than average. The events, by definition, get larger and larger. And essentially, we have to become different humans in order to effectively deal with that, which comes back to this perspective thing and understand and see ourselves in a different way and operate in a different way, right?
Yes, and the different human that you're stating is us embracing our full potential. This is, I believe, what it means to be human, to be fully capacitated, fully awakened, fully engaged, so that we can embrace the change and thrive in the new world that's emerging, rather than clinging to the limited abilities, the limited perspective.
From the past. That gave us all the problems of the past, right.
Yeah, and trying to reinforce the world that we've known is a stepping stone, it's a bridge. It was never meant to be the end. It was meant and designed, and whether you're talking about the founding fathers of this nation, America, or if you're talking about the scientific brilliant minds of the 19th and 20th century, Henry Ford was very clear. He said the internal combustion engine is not the end. It's a stepping stone until we get to the next step. It wasn't meant to last for 100 years. Nikola Tesla said when he built the power grid that we have now, he said this is temporary, so you've got some power. It's not meant to be the end. And here we are 100 years later, we're clinging to this. Those are bridges to a better world, and we are the generation now. And what's driving this? I'm going to go back to the big cycles. This is a time of extremes, and it's being driven by 3 cycles of change that are rarely talked about in the West, any one of which would be big on its own, but all 3 are converging in our lifetime. Climate, we're very familiar with. So climate cycle is number 1. economic cycles. And there are variable. There's 66-year cycles, there are 150-year cycles. Economic cycles are converging. The third one is rarely talked about right now, cycles of human conflict, John. And human conflict is directly related to magnetic strength of the Earth, solar flares, so all of these things. So, and I want to be very clear, it doesn't mean that we must have war when these cycles are up. It means that we are vulnerable and susceptible to conflict. And if we don't know that, we fall into the trap. So any one of those three would be a big deal. All three are converging now, and when my audiences can see the scientific convergence, they say, my God, no wonder the world looks like it's fallen apart at the seams.
How in the world do you get a path going forward in the middle of that?
It's a really good question. And the great poet early in the 20th century, Khalil Gibran, what he said is that work is our love made visible.
Oh, wow.
Work is love made visible. And I'm under no illusion it's taking tremendous amount of work, personally and collectively, to make this shift. I prefer to think of that work as our love for ourselves, for one another, a visible expression of what we claim in our hearts. Let's put it to work in our families and communities and move forward. The way we do that, and what I tell our audience is everyone learns differently. And that's the beauty of so many teachers and so many ways of thinking. And what I say to my audience, I say, you're with me for a couple of hours today. Everything that you've known about your world, put that into a file folder, because it's worked for you so far. And what I'm going to share with you today, put it in a new file folder in your mind called possibilities. When something shows up in your life and that old way doesn't work, let it go instead of struggling, and open up the new file folder of possibilities, because it says we live in a world of connection, we live in a world of cooperation, and we begin to solve our problems and think differently about ourselves. In that new paradigm, that's where we begin to thrive. And one of the keys to knowing that is to embrace this tool, harmonizing the heart and the brain, so that we can ask, what is true for us? What's right for me right now? What does my body need? When it's showing me an illness, what does my body need right now? What the studies are showing, John, is the change of the world has created more stress, and that stress has led to higher degrees of disease, because the stress isn't bad, it's unresolved. People have yet many people have yet to learn to resolve the stress. This heart-brain harmony is a key to creating resilience. It actually raises the baseline of resilience so that we can deal with more change in a healthy way and ease that stress as we go into this. So this is where it all comes together. It comes full circle from the science, the spiritual traditions, everyday life. And I don't think we have to go to live on a mountaintop halfway around the world and leave everything that we've built and leave those that we love to find this potential. I think we are wired to live it in our everyday lives.
So, Gregg, my friend, what's up?
Well, I'd like to begin with the big picture, and I want to see how you feel about that.
Let's do that.
So, John, as a systems thinker, I like to look at the big picture. I mean, go way out literally into the cosmos. See what's happening in the cosmos that could possibly influence us and our relationship to the world. And this ties into a conversation that you and I have had many segments of that goes all the way back to the year 2012. You know, for a lot of people, 2012, it was kind of a joke. People laughed about it. Some people made fun of it. I had a radio interview recently with an interviewer that interviewed me in 2012 and was disappointed. He said, man, I thought something big was going to happen. When are these changes going to start? I just had an interview with him recently, and he said, when are the changes going to stop? So this is interesting, because the ancient Mayans and the Mayan calendar never said the world would end. They said very clearly that 2012 marked a pivotal point where we would begin to see changes, and that when those changes were complete, they said we would not recognize our nations, we would not recognize ourselves. What a lot of people don't know, John, is that we are still in that window of time, and here's the reason. There's a mathematic equation, there is a constant that is applied to the end of what is called a great world age. Great world ages are 5,125 years in length. And 2012 marked the fifth of those five, completing one big cycle. Between the time that one world age ends, another one begins, it's not a clean break. There's a buffer, a transition time that's 36 years. 36 years, 18 years before 2012 and 18 years after, which interestingly puts us right at that 2030 mark that is coming up with the United Nations, with the World Economic Forum, and all of the changes that they're trying to implement by 2030. So we are in this buffer right now. And as a scientist, what's fascinating, John, is to see that it is a convergence of cycles, but not only cycles, it's a convergence of time. Some people call this a time storm, where timelines of potentials that are seen by remote viewers, for example, or by some technologies that we now have that look into timelines of the past and the future. The timelines collapse and they overlap in this jumble of possibilities where it essentially says anything goes. It says that any events that have happened in the last 5,000 years are now possible as these timelines converge. And I think this is precisely what we're seeing right now.
You're right. The old system is going to go away and it's going to fail in bits and pieces. And then you're going to have reactions. I've said before that I think that the dark world, or whatever the term you want to use, is going to do everything that they can in a limited amount of time. It almost seems like there's a deadline at the end. There's some kind of constraining, looming event that is coming this way that all of those guys at that level know about, and that they gotta do whatever they can do and try everything they can while they still got time that they can do it.
Yeah, I agree, John. I think 2030 is that deadline, and it's interesting when either through software, AI, or human intuition and remote viewing, when they view down those timelines, it's very difficult to see beyond that 2030. And I think the reason is because it's based upon the choices that we're making right now. And we are making choices whether we're making choices or not. To make no choice is still a choice. And I agree with what you say about the freedoms. When I say we can't go back, it's impossible to go back to much of the structure of the world as we knew even 5 years ago, even 3 years ago. But what's happening is the values that humans cherish the most in societies now are becoming very apparent. Freedom is one of those values. Freedom of expression, freedom to share ideas, freedom of speech, sovereignty of money, sovereignty of our own bodies. Who has control over money? Who has control over our bodies? So freedom is a big, big part of what's happening here.
That's what everybody takes forward from this kind of event. It may, on the outside look like it kind of solidifies into something that looks like the past, but everybody has gone through this event, and it's in a sense seared their psychology, seared their self, because they've now, it's like going through a war, I guess. You've seen things and you've experienced things that you hadn't done before, and that are profound in terms of their implications and the effects and the larger effects. And so you kind of wonder about, what are they going to try to do next that can somehow overshadow, be more successful than what they've already tried to do. Because they weren't quite as successful as they thought they'd be, I guess. Yeah, the thing that's interesting to me is how you maintain some coherence in all of this going forward. By that I mean, if you on one hand you've got distinct efforts, profoundly highly funded efforts to try to break the system apart on one side, and to to generate more dependency through technology and in a sense, depreciate humanity. And on the other side, you have this possibility, this vector that points to human evolution and independence and so on. And but the transition time is the thing that's really going to be quite interesting, because it's guaranteed to be full of wild cards, big surprise kind of events. And you talk about changes in the financial system. Well, clearly it has the distinct possibility that you could have earth changes, increasing earthquakes and tsunamis and things like that. Always throw in the alien kind of question and possibility, and you could have on the same side some extraordinary kind of breakthroughs in technology. I mean, AI, you've talked about AI earlier today. There's just all of these things, and a half a dozen or more that are all kind of in a big soup that are coming together in one way or another, going to influence this the next few years. And how that turns out is and that says nothing about waves of energy coming out of the center of the galaxy or any of the other kind of cosmological kind of stuff. It's just wild.
Some people call those black swan events, or whatever we want to call them, but all of them, when you put that all together, what it does is it forces humans to think differently about themselves and about their relationship to the world. And I think this is something that has been underestimated by the powers that you referenced that are trying to manipulate and impose their ideas upon the world, because they have begun to impose these ideas through the controls and everything, the wars, everything that we're seeing right now, under the assumption that humans will continue to think the way that they have always thought. And the reality is, and what the only way that it's possible to impose these things is to break the social alliances and the personal belief system. So we've seen the foundation for this for a number of years. We've seen groups pitted against other groups, and the media supports this: men against women, blacks against whites, Christians against Muslims, the rich against the poor. There's always got to be some kind of an enemy out there. Well, the consequence of that is people are waking up, and they are now seeing themselves as more than black and white, more than Christian and Muslim, more than rich or poor. They're seeing themselves as people with these fundamental freedoms that they're losing, and so they are actually banding together with stronger social alliances. And that's part of the symmetry that you see from the big picture. And it's because of those social alliances that I am seeing, and I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing, the efforts the change is going to happen. And I think everyone knows it. We're in it. The only way out of it is to go through it. The key is, do we go through it and end up with a soft landing, or do we have a hard landing? And what I'm seeing is society is recognizing we need the change. What we've done before is broken, because it is based upon quicksand when it comes to the global finances, for example, and fiat currencies. So let's work together and try something different. And I'm seeing that kind of percolate to the surface in the midst of all of the darkness that we're seeing out here. And I think that's encouraging.
So hello, my friends, and welcome. It's What's Up? John Peterson here from the Arlington Institute, and Gregg Braden and I get together every 2 weeks for a half an hour or so to just chat about whatever's on our minds. And we're happy to have you with us. Gregg, what's up? What you been thinking about?
John, it's good to see you. And, there's so many things we could talk about. You and I had a conversation recently that the events unfolding in the world are apparently not random. I think it's very clear that they're not random events, that we're driving towards some kind of an outcome. I'm looking at another facet of that non-randomness. And the question that I asked is, are we living out a script?
Mm.
Is the timeline, or are the events of the timeline that we are living, is it mapped out as a script? And if it is mapped out, do we succumb to that script, or do we, by virtue of consciousness and our free will, is it part of our destiny to transcend, not necessarily even fight, but to become more than where that script apparently leads? One of the ways that I've gone about looking at this is looking at biblical history. Back in the 1990s, I became a member of an organization that's called BAR, Biblical Archaeology Review. And it was fascinating, John, because it was moving away from the religiosity of the Bible, rather looking at the Bible as a historical document of events that actually occurred. Now, when I was a kid, a lot of the things in the Bible, I was growing up in the 50s, 60s, a lot of people thought, those were make-believe things. And what Biblical Archaeology Review and some other organizations did is they began to take the Bible as a literal document of history, regardless of the religion. And so they'd say, well, according to the Bible, these things happen here. What if we dig here? And we had sites like Ashkelon, just north of Gaza. And I've had the opportunity to be there personally, to visit the archaeological sites in Ashkelon and Jericho, and the tunnels under Solomon's temple, and things like that. So what the Bible has shown historically is that it is based on information that is factual. When we think about a scripted timeline, the question is, how deep do those facts run?
What I think about when you say that is that we're back in simulation world again.
Yeah.
That this is some kind of a deterministic environment, that certainly you have latitude within the game space, if you will, within the design of the rules of the operating space, but you can't get outside, outside of your lane. But you can run across and try any number of other kind of things. Now, it's a kind of a simplistic. It's clearly more complex and sophisticated than that.
Yeah.
But there is something. I mean, this goes back to kind of the cyclical nature of reality. This goes almost directly to the underlying principles and the concepts underneath Martin Armstrong's computer, Socrates, and which says that everything in this reality is based upon some kind of a cyclical, oscillatory kind of process. And so no matter whether you take the weather or politics or education or family relationships or, anything around, Armstrong's got 75 of them that he's isolated and that figured out. He says, it just keeps coming together and they keep doing it. And sometimes they're additive, sometimes they're subtractive, and so on. But that's, again, like saying it's a big machine that you're inside of, and that and it is therefore predictable, which of course is what Marty Armstrong uses the whole thing for. And so you've just raised it to another kind of level. One of the interesting things about the last maybe decade is this the kind of the emergence of this idea, for me at least, is the emergence of this idea of this living in a simulation. And as you know, I've had a number of experiences where I've been kind of shown that it's a simulation of one sort or another, and that then raises all kinds of deep kind of questions about what this is all about, and is there a God, and what's heaven, and all these kinds of things that I at least grew up with, that were kind of the core components of the operating space that we were constrained with. And so, no, I think it's really quite interesting.
when you think of a simulation, it is based on an iterative formula. And when I spent a lot of time studying fractals when I was in the defense industry, in terms of software development. And fractals are fascinating, and they're so simple, John. And the whole idea of a fractal is that you have the fractal image that we're used to seeing is the picture representation of a mathematic formula.
Of course.
And when you shift that formula, so the formula is represented by the letter R, for example, and you shift the formula R plus one, the plus one could be a change in the environment. It could be a change in society. It could be a change in our belief systems. R plus one, that then becomes the input for the next iteration of,
right.
of that calculation. Well, where this gets interesting is that the best science of the modern world has shown us they have reduced our natural world into some combination of only about 4 fractal patterns.
Wow.
That are combined and they are iterative. That is what a simulation is. That's what keeps the simulation running. It's every time something changes, then that change is fed back into the equation. So from that perspective, my question, what I think about is within that formula, I see no reason that we do not have the latitude and the freedom to break out of those fractal patterns, to create new fractal patterns. I don't think it would break the simulation. I've had people say to me, well, you're going to break the simulation. I don't think it would do that.
Well, how then is it predictive in the terms that you're kind of suggesting?
Well, I think this is the essence of what our lives and our time are all about. That we've also heard that this is an experiment, that we're living this great experiment where we have some degree of free will. So if we follow and succumb to the script, we're not using, I guess we're using our free will to follow what we believe is predetermined. And if we are to take the freedoms that have been described, whether it's the biblical text or whether it's in biological text or whatever it is, of choice, free will, and consciousness, and we choose not to follow that timeline, we choose not to have those wars. Now, I see nothing that prevents us from doing that, but everyone that I talk to and all of the sources I'm looking at feel that it is predetermined, so it must come to pass. And I don't know that that's true.